everyone out there in the void. How you doing? It's me, Scarring at the Shaking Fist, ready to do some more Christian making fun of. Isn't this grand? Aye! Well, today, finishing off the two-part video on Redeem Zuva and all ten proofs, arguments for God. It's not proofs, it's arguments, because they don't do proof. They don't have any, so they have arguments to lead you down a line of thought. So that's cool. Yay.
Just say the word and you're forgiven, and have no fear 'cause he is risen. Before you realize the rapture ensues, in this world in front of the becomes a fading memory. Rejoice just as the choir sings. Rejoice now.
And now just one more thing. It's the bit of the video where I have to do the YouTube things and I go, hey, why don't you like the video? If you haven't subscribe and leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. And if you like me enough and you really want to make the channel grow, there's ways to support the channel in the description below. So please do that if you so feel inclined. I would be ever so grateful, and thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing, even if you just hate one.
The ontological argument says God exists because of the way he is.
Oh. Not only did I lose all the film and I have to restart again, so this is the second filming. I have to go through the ontological argument. Don't you love the ontological argument? Isn't it the best argument? It's just the argument that lets you know that they don't really give a shit about what you think it's all about. Some form of presuppositionalism. Because, well, God is this. I'm getting ahead of myself. I just want to get this done.
Serenity now!
But I have to say that it's my least favourite argument. Because, it's been designed by committee over many years of people going, well, I suppose God has to be this way, and I suppose God has to be this way. It doesn't really have a lot of foundation in Scripture. Well, I suppose there's a couple lines in the New Testament that say things, but God acts very differently in the Old Testament. It's almost like it was all written at different times in different places by different people with different meanings. Yay!
Dum 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 dum.
I mean, I hate it more than Pascal's wager. No, I don't hate it more than Pascal's wager. I don't. It's my second least favorite argument, I suppose.
Bruh. No, seriously. God is defined as that than which nothing greater can be conceived.
Well, as long as you can define it, then it's cool. Then God is whatever you want it to be, isn't it? Because, there's not like there's been a whole bunch of civilizations throughout the entirety of time that went, do you know, actually, there's lots of gods, and they're not all powerful powers than a human. But, they're not all powerful. But, Jesus says that it is, I guess, maybe in a little way, in a roundabout way, even though the Old Testament goes on about no other gods before me, insinuating that there's other gods. It's almost like it's almost like the idea of Yahweh was to be a god of a people, instead of just like, this is the god, Marduk is the god of Babylon, or Baal is, whatever, you know what I mean? It's not just individual places, it's trying to be for an entire people, that's why you have to make, people are the idols that you're supposed to worship and not, the idols that they put in temples. But, hey, who gives a shit about why the religion came about? Because, if we thought of an argument afterwards that, means more than all of it, well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because, well, God, we're just going to say that from the start you have to accept that God is just the most powerful being, and that's the only way that God can be. Because we say so. So I'm sure Hindus would have something to say about that, but who gives a shit about Hindus, right?
That means God must be all-powerful, because being all-powerful is greater than having limited power. God must be all-knowing, because being all-knowing is greater than having limited knowledge. God must be all-good, because being all-good is greater than being flawed. And God must exist, because existing is greater than not existing.
So it's nice that we get to define a god, and then we get to define what those definitions mean with other definitions, and if we define them in such a way that he must exist. Because he has to be all-powerful, because he's God, not saying, we'll forget about all the non-all-powerful gods. But, Yahweh's all-powerful because he's the ultimate God, so he has all the powers, so then he has to have these qualities, because, well, if you say he's all-powerful, then he has to have all of these qualities, doesn't it? Because existing is better than non-existing, is it? Is it better than non-existing? When you have entire swathes of people of your religion that want to go out and cause wars just for the sake of your religion, or, I don't know, you have a whole group of people in the Christian faith that want to go into Jerusalem and, I don't know, make the Jews get slaughtered on the hills of Megiddo, so that Revelation can happen, because it's what it says in Revelation. Maybe that isn't better than him existing. Maybe that's much worse. Maybe it's much worse to have a whole fan base of people for a being, whether he's real or not, devoted to bringing an end to the world because they think they're so fucking super special that, it has to happen when they're here. Because, life is sacred, Remember, life is sacred until they want the rapture to come, and then life isn't sacred anymore because it's about what's after it, isn't it?
But don't be giving me all this shit about the sanctity of life. I mean, even if there were such a thing, I don't think it's something you can blame on God. Now, you know where the sanctity of life came from? We made it up. You know why? Because we're alive. Self-interest. Living people have a strong interest in promoting the idea that somehow life is sacred.
Wait, just because we can think of a greatest possible being doesn't mean it actually exists. Well, actually it does, because existing in reality is greater than just existing in the mind.
So, existing is better than non-existing because we're alive and we're super special and we exist. So, it must be better, mustn't it? It must be better because, we exist. So existence is better because it's better than not existing, doesn't it? Not existing is really, so when I think of people like in North Korea, you know what I mean? I don't think of a bunch of people that if you ask that question, they would say, yes, do you know what existing is better than non-existing? Living is better doesn't take into account the sort of living conditions that people have to live in. So, but of course that's just a human thing, isn't it? That's just a human thing. God is up in his palace in heaven, with all the stuff because he's all powerful and he's all the all things, except all the all bad things. You know what I mean? He's all the all good things, just none of the all bad things. And we know this because you've deduced it through reasoning. And I know we're not supposed to. I know God says not to lean on our own understanding, and we should really lean on His. So it's really best if we listen to people that make up arguments for God, because at least it's for God, and that's what matters more. Because if it doesn't matter if it's made up or not, it's just obviously better, isn't it? It's just obviously better.
Oh, obvious. I'll grant you it's obvious. Trouble is, just because things are obvious doesn't mean they're true.
But onwards into more of just the stupidity of the ontological argument. Isn't this fun? Aren't we all having fun?
Nothing can make me feel better now, except cocaine. On and on and on. And yet, people still turn to Jesus. You will notice, though, that the kind of people who turn to Jesus tend to be the sort of people who haven't done that well with everybody else. Like the people who are here, for instance.
Okay, but I could use that to argue for the existence of the greatest possible pizza. Well, actually, no, you can't, because the definition of pizza implies limitations, like a limited size and able to be broken.
What if I think of a more powerful God than God? What if I think of God's dad, Farway? And Farway is just as powerful as Yahweh, except he can also do the impossible things. He can make a stone that he himself cannot lift. And he can move it. Ah! That is how powerful he is. And that is a God I've thought in my own brain. So that means he exists. Come, and let's worship Farway together. Because that's what this argument says. As long as you can think of a sufficiently, infinite being, and a sufficiently grand being, well then it's just true because, well, your thoughts are powerful, yo.
If you had a pizza that was indestructible, eternal, all-powerful, and infinitely large, it wouldn't be a pizza anymore, it would just be God. Basically, if your pizza gets infinitely great, it'll turn into God.
Well, as long as you can think of anything sufficiently of those qualities, it just becomes God. So does then it supplant God, or does it in fact become God itself? Does it go, I was a pizza, and then I am sufficiently great, I am now Yahweh? Because, of course, we always forget when we're talking about these arguments, everybody addresses the arguments like, well, we need to address the arguments with the real nugget here is, everybody goes, well, the person I'm arguing with is arguing for Christianity, so the ontological argument must be about Christianity. This is just the way it has to be, right? Of course it is. Yes, it has to be for Christianity, because the Christian's making it. You see, so what about the ontological argument says that Allah is not real? What about the ontological argument says that the Brahma is not real? What about the ontological argument says that Abzu and Tiamat did not mix the waters, creating everything? What about the ontological argument disproves any other religion? But, we're just supposed to, it's proving to Christianity. No, it doesn't prove Christianity. And as you've said, well, if you think of it enough, it becomes sufficiently different, so I'll just go find myself a new god. I just think of one, and then I can make my own god. Yeah. As long as I can think of it being more powerful than Yahweh.
Oh Lord, why have you forsaken me?
When God gives you lemons, you find a new God. Power thirst. God Mary, King of the Jews.
There is also the argument from personal experience.
Oh no!
Argument from personal experience.
Whatever shall I do? I am certainly doomed.
It may sound silly, but everyone does see the world through the lens of their own personal experience. A lot of people are convinced God exists either because of supernatural events they've seen.
So they like to tell us that, the devil can fuck with your head. So the devil, and his demons, his horde of demons, likes to, come into your head and whisper in your ear and make you see and do the evil things, or the things that are not in the sight of God. So how do you know? So let's just grant that happens. So then when you see one of these supernatural events, well, how do you know that it's Jesus or the Yahwehs or the Jehovah if you can't spell, or how do you know it's that and not the devil or another god? How do you, aside from, well, I live in a Christian country and I'm surrounded by a Christian family with Christian friends. So aside from that, what makes, well, it looked like Jesus or it looked like an angel. I mean, I know the Bible describes angels as having, lots of eyes and different, multiple faces and all these things. And I know a couple times they turn up in human form. But that winged angel with the halo, that's definitely what they were always described as, right? So, of course, if you see them, it's not like, I don't know, the alien people, the people that think they're abducted by aliens because they've watched a few too many sci-fi films and then, have some of the sleep paralysis, or they think that fucking they've been abducted in the car and they're like, oh, the Greys probed me, because they watched it in a film. So then what the alien thing becomes, the brain manifests into what they see. It's weird, that, isn't it? And it's not like prayer at all. Like any supernatural event at all. It couldn't be, a bunch of religious fervor that's induced during a religious ceremony, or, just a Sunday service, going and talking to your preacher, having a particular heated conversation about God with another believer, Bible group. You just listen to a particularly powerful song. The brain works in mental ways. But hey, of course, it's nothing like that. It's definitely God, and we can't replicate those kind of supernatural events in a lab setting with a small electromagnetic magnet that they put over your temple and run a small electric current through this electromagnet. And after they sit you in the dark for an half an hour, you'll see some fucking angels, my friend.
3 out of 4 people now believe in angels. What are you, fucking stupid? You know what I think it is? I think it's a massive, collective, psychotic, chemical flashback of all the drugs by all Americans from 1960 to 1990. 30 years of adulterated street drugs will get you some fucking angels, my friend.
Or because of answered prayers.
Let me get this straight. So you kneel down at your bed at night, and you put your hands on the bed, and then you go, ah, and you put your hands together, and then you either say it in your brain, or you say it up to the sky, and you go, oh, Jesus of the Lord above, could you bring the world peace, and, you know, maybe if I could sleep with Barbara down the road, that would be lovely, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, what? And then, you know, you wait, and you wait, and you wait, on, you know, you wait for, like, I don't know, a sign, just a sign. Well, like we're pattern-seeking creatures at all. You know, it's not like we see people's faces into stuff. It's not like, you know, being a social creature means that we see these sort of patterns and things, and then we can see these sorts of, you know, signs, as you want to put it, and then our brains put two and two together because it's not very good at intuition. And, you know, really good at this. We're really, really good at it. You know, we do it as a pastime. You know what I mean? Like, you know, people go out and look at the clouds and they go, look, did you see the face in the clouds?
Bar at the top in T-shape. T-shape cloud. T-shape cloud. Cloud into a T-shape.
Prayer is like the little pendulums that you do when you're talking to a psychic idiot, and they're like, oh, you know, it goes, this means yes, and this means no, and this means I don't know, and they go, oh, I'm gonna have a baby, could you tell me if it's a boy or a girl? And then, you know, it goes, yes, no, whatever, you know, and then if it says that you have a baby boy, you're going to have a baby boy, and then you have a baby boy, well, you're going to remember that dickhead with the pendulum, well, they said that they were going to have a baby boy, didn't they? And then, but if they said they were going to have a baby girl, you're probably not going to remember that. You know what I'm saying? And answered prayer isn't like that at all, because God and an angel or Jesus doesn't come down and touch you on the knee, offer you a biscuit and a brew, and go, this is how you should deal with the problems that you've prayed to me about. They don't answer you at all. You have to look for signs. Well, do you know, Brad was beating me something awful, so I decided that maybe I should lead him, so I prayed to the good Lord above, and then I waited for a sign, and I saw some leaves blowing across the road, and that meant that I should cross the road too. I should leave, because God was talking to me through the leaves.
Suppose your prayers aren't answered. What do you say? Well, it's God's will. Thy will be done. Fine, but if it's God's will and he's going to do what he wants to anyway, why the fuck bother praying in the first place? Seems like a big waste of time to me. I say, fine, pray for anything you want. Pray for anything. But what about the divine plan? Gave it a lot of thought, decided it was a good plan, put it into practice. And for billions and billions of years, the divine plan has been doing just fine. Now you come along and pray for something. Well, suppose the thing you want isn't in God's divine plan. What do you want him to do? Change his plan? What's the use of being God if every rundown schmuck with a $2 prayer book can come along and fuck up your plan?
Or just coincidences in their life.
What? A coincidence? A coincidence could be used as an argument for God? What? This argument is nothing better than just convincing yourself. It's an argument for yourself against the unbelieving part of yourself. That's why he's saying this is an argument. You're not supposed to say this to a person like me, because we go, have you seen this dickhead? Well, I saw it. Well, I don't give a shit. You could be lying, right? This is for insecure theists, right? This is for a Christian that has some kind of doubt. And it's supposed to go, well, you did see the thing, and Jesus did speak to you one that time, didn't he? And you're supposed to go, well, you know, yeah, he did. So that means that the other things, that it's fine. You have the personal experience. Because you're supposed to, you know. Because remember, Jesus is always there for you, to be your best friend, and to give you all the pertinent knowledge of life, as long as you ask in the secret of your own head, and you wait an indeterminate amount of time for a sign that is vaguely in the meaning that, you know, like how often do you go, I really wish that, you know, world peace would happen, and then it happens the next day. It never happens. You know, it's always, you know, I really wanted that new hat, and I really wanted that coat, and, you know, I really wanted to fuck this person, and I really wanted that job, and God, give me. That's all it is. You know what I mean? And sometimes you got what you wanted, and sometimes you didn't, and you use your confirmation bias to go, well, you know, I got what I wanted some of the time, So I've decided to be a maximalist about the idea of God. Ah, isn't this fun? Nay. I love the arguments for God. They're all so well thought out and recent.
So this is very good at convincing oneself that God exists, but not very good at convincing other people.
What? You saw a thing and something happened to you and you're trying to convince me and you could be making it up? I never would have thought that it would be, hard to convince other people with. Oh look, I had a religious experience. Let me tell you about religious experiences, folks. You ever heard of a person called Marjo fucking Gortner? So, in like the 1940s or 50s or something, Marjo Gortner's parents decided what it would be really good to do to make a lot of money was to make their son into a child evangelical.
And all across the nation for the past 4 years, the little preacher has been going up and down, winning lost humanity with the message of the Master. At this time, let me introduce to you little Marjo.
Howdy, neighbors. May the Lord bless you.
As a child, I'd want to go out and play, and we'd have to spend hours and hours, memorizing. And my mind would slip. Finally, my mother would begin to lose her patience with me, and she would put a pillow over my head maybe and smother me for a little bit. Other times, she'd hold me under the water faucet, but she never wanted to put any marks on my body because she knew I had to be in front of the press, and so she'd never hit me or anything.
I thank God for my darling Christian mother that pointed me to Jesus. If we had more good Christian mothers that would teach the boys and girls how to pray more instead of drinking cocktails and smoking filthy old cigarettes, we would have a better America, better men and women, and not so much juvenile delinquency.
And they used to make him go around churches and heal people and do all this shit, and then they stole all of his fucking money. So then he, when he grew up, decided that he was going to make a documentary film and won an Emmy in, I think, 1972, of the best documentary about exactly how these evangelical people go around and do these sermons, how they use the incidental music to put people into a lather so they can literally get bags full of money. Like literal bag, they just empty out bags. This is all the money they gave us. Because, well, if I say the thing and then the music rises, you go, and then and the music comes up and everybody goes, oh, exaltation. And then you go, would you like to give me some money, please? And they go, for the Lord. There's your experience, folks. There's your religious experience. As it said once on the ashram door in India, brains and shoes must be left at the door. And just one more thing. And just one more thing on the argument of personal experience. What about the opposite? What about the lack of personal experience? What about that? I was a fundamentalist Southern Baptist for about 10 to 15 years. I never once heard the word of the Lord whispered in my ear when I asked for anything. When I asked for the Lord for help with bullies or to help with sexual assault as a child or anything like that, not word fucking one. While everyone around me was going, oh, the Lord told me to do this, and the Lord told me to do that, and it talks to me every day, and So what? Does he pick and choose? Did I not believe enough? Like, I was a child. How is that not enough? I wasn't an atheist going, well, I'll give it a go. I was a child being told that this is the way the world was, and I believed it wholeheartedly. Why wasn't I told about it? Why did God deign to speak to everyone else except for me? So, really, if you have a person who was a full-time believer, like I was, right, and did all the Bible study, and read all these different versions of the Bible, and fucking, went to, like, all these Sunday schools and all this different shit, why? So, when I hear other people tell me that, well, God did this for me, and God talked to me in this way, can you see why I see that as a whole heap of fucking self-indulgent bullshit? Was I not good enough for God? I thought he loved everyone. All loving and all just, isn't he? He knows everyone interpersonally and knows everything you've done and all your intentions and everything you're going to do. Just didn't give a shit about the people he doesn't talk to. But, hey, they're the unbelievers, so, fuck us, right?
The transcendental argument basically says without God, nothing can make sense at all. There's a lot of things we assume, but we can't prove. We assume that logic works. We assume that there's consistency in the natural world. We assume that truth exists, but we can't prove any of these things scientifically, because these are the basic assumptions we need to make to even do science. All of these things make sense if we presuppose a worldview where God exists, because then we can say all these other things are grounded in the mind of God. But if God doesn't exist, then we have no justification for the things we assume, and everything just collapses.
Oh, it just collapses! It just collapses! It just fritters away into nothingness because God didn't exist. If we just presuppose that he exists, well then everything has to make sense because he's the basis of everything. You know, I know that science showed that there is consistency in nature, you know, and I know that science has shown that there actually is truth and we can do all these things, but it doesn't matter because God, it's just God. You know, the fool says in his heart there is no God because if there wasn't a God, it would all fall apart. It's the bit... Get how this is supposed to convince people. Like, unless, you know, well, you know, you trust the person and, you know, they've led you down this path and then, you know, none of it can make sense without the God. You know, it's really nice that you've given, he says at the end, and I'm just going to mention it here, you know, that there's this whole, he's made this whole list of arguments that he doesn't necessarily agree with. Just give everybody the tools because, you know, they might want to use whatever argument they want to try and argue for it. It's great, isn't it? It's great if you could just go, I don't really believe in some of these things, but, you know, if it works for you, convince whoever you can with whatever fallacious reasoning you want. Because that's totally amazing in how it works. Because remember, everything makes sense because of God. And I mean, it says it in the Bible, doesn't it? The Bible. Well, then it must be true, except it doesn't really say that. It just kind of says that. But, you know, if you squint your eyes and, you know, look hard enough with your eye, you know, looking the other way from a distance, you can make it look like whatever you want, can't you? It's one of those things I love about all these arguments. Well, it's just the, you know, I can just presuppose that God exists because, well, I want to make an argument that says God exists. So I'm just going to presuppose that he does. And why don't you presuppose with me?
So I fucks with you. Shit, I fucks with you too. Is that good? Yes, that's a yes.
Then we'll fox with each other.
Now, doesn't everything make sense in the argument I've just made? Well, as long as we presuppose that God exists first, you know.
I am the weaver.
Why would this ever be an entire planet full of people that have evolved, that have, through time, learned how to master the nature around them? You know, because, you know, it only makes sense that we could do that if God. So does that mean that since chimps have entered the Stone Age, that God is influencing them as well? Or was it just us? Or we're just special? Like, did they get it? Are they, like, you know, they're only related to us. They're only like our brothers, you know, because we all came from a common ancestor. So is it the common ancestor that was imbued with all the special power that from the transcendental argument that makes everything make sense because God makes it make sense? So it's also imbued with bonobos. Should bonobos be coming into the Stone Age any year now? But no, of course, it's just us. We're just the special ones. I keep on forgetting.
There is the argument from the mind, or consciousness, which says consciousness cannot be explained naturally. Generally, the atheist explanation of consciousness is that our brain is just a very advanced biological machine, but unlike our minds, machines can be reduced to their parts. Now, our brain can be reduced to its brain cells, but that's not the same as the experience of consciousness.
Of course, if you call it a machine, from the outset and muddy the waters, well then it has to be a machine, doesn't it? So we get to make the analogy of the machine thing again, because, you know, have you seen a watch? So, because you don't understand biology enough, or neuroscience enough, to understand why, when you reduce the brain down to its constituent parts of nerve cells, grey matter, you know, like the electrical impulses, like what actually makes the brain tick, right? Everything that you experience isn't real, right? And we know this because your brain can't experience anything. It has an entire nervous system that feeds through electronic impulses, right? Everything that you experience to your brain, and your brain sorts it out. It is nothing but it's a biological sorting mechanism. And I know I just complained about machines, so I couldn't on the spot think of a different word. So whatever. But my point is just like, there's more to your brain than nerve cells. You know, what about cortisol? What about adrenaline? What about, you know, fucking literally like, oh my god, I can't. What about dopamine? What about serotonin? What about all of these fluids that get released in your brain? You know, these hormones make you feel a lot of things because they wash over your brain cells and make you react in a certain way, right? So consciousness is why God exists, and God only made us with consciousness. So what about dogs? You know, collies, stuff like that. They're really fucking clever. They have consciousness. They have an idea of self. They build the moral code. They do all the things we do, just without the language we do, so it's not as complex. And they don't have thumbs. And they can't teach each other like we do, because they don't have words. It's almost like we all used our collective consciousnesses together to build a system in which we could all talk to each other. But that's beside the point. To think that consciousness is super special because we have it. Because once again, it's a nice large amount of self-interest. You know, because of course consciousness came from Yahweh and not Allah. And, you know, Jehovah and not Allah or Yahweh or, you know, the Brahma or, you know, Enki. You know, there's loads of other gods that, you know, created humans, created everything. You know, how does the consciousness point to any of them? 1800s, you know, they tried to find the soul, right? You know, for your consciousness. And they said, well, your soul is this thing called the homunculus. And the homunculus, you know, weighs about 11 ounces. And that is your being leaving the body, apparently. It's weird how, you know, if we try and look for the soul now, you can't find it. And there's plenty of, you know, hardcore Christians that work in the bio field, you know, like, and in the neuroscience field. And they still can't find a soul. They don't pretend to have. You know, because other people would then have to replicate their experiments and they wouldn't be able to do it, and then they would laugh at them.
For example, you could find a part of our brain that sees the color yellow, but that's not the same as the experience of seeing yellowness. You cannot study consciousness scientifically because one can only observe one's own consciousness. For example, there is no way to know if we all see the same colors.
Yeah, there is. We have two ways of discerning this. One, we have a number of cones in our eyes, and those cones, they like, you know, they make the amount of they make the spectrum of colors that we can see. You know, they allow those colors in that spectrum to be seen. That's why we can't see like ultraviolet light and stuff like that properly. You know what I'm saying? Also, how do we know that this yellow isn't? Being a Minecraft YouTuber that really wants to just convince smaller children that play Minecraft to believe in God, because it's easier to hook them when they're young, innit? You gotta hook them when they're young. Anyway, so because you specifically cater to these type of, like, you know, children, you might not have the education to have heard of the Ishihara colorblind test. And you know what the great thing about that is it proves how we can prove that people don't see colors the same way. Because what we do is we have a series of circles, and they have multiple colors in it, right? And they're opposing colors sometimes, and sometimes they're similar colors. And there's certain forms of color blindness that we have actually found, you know, because of the defectiveness in the eyes. It's almost like every time something goes wrong in the brain, we figure out how it works a little bit more. So, and then they could go, and some of them are fake, of course. So some of them are the real thing, and they go, I can't tell this number. And some of them are like, oh no, you're faking it, because no one's that type of colorblind. It's almost like we actually can discern how we see colors from each other. Oh, it's consciousness, you can't study that. I mean, you do realize that in the past 5 to 10 years, we've actually been developing ways to watch people's consciousness. We can sort of record dreams. We can actually see shapes and outlines of the things people are dreaming. That is direct experience of someone else's consciousness. But of course I wouldn't expect a Christian to know that, because Christians don't have a wealth of of knowledge or a need to have a wealth of knowledge to understand things because they go, well, I believe in God and God's real. I'm a nice, red-blooded, God-fearing Christian, and I don't need to know any of those fancy science jargon because I've got all the answers I need right here in my Bible. So I don't have no need to figure out things, so I'm not going to learn about things that's going to teach us about the world in which we live, because I'm a fucking moron. I suppose it's really easy to make these arguments and to see how fruitful they could be, and to the veracity of its claims when you don't fucking understand the world in which you live, and even a modicum. Hey, you sit at home playing Minecraft, and I'm sure the world will keep turning.
Who knows, maybe yellow looks like this to me. For all you know, you could be the only person who exists. A single atom is not conscious. 2 atoms are not conscious. A bunch of atoms are not conscious. So even if you have a complex system, it's still just a complex arrangement of atoms which are not conscious. So where does consciousness come from? So this isn't exactly an argument for God, but it is an argument for the human soul because it shows you need something immaterial to explain consciousness.
So you're also a liar as well. So really, you've got 9 arguments for God. You've got all 9 arguments for God, and one that says, well, shouldn't a soul exist? It's not even an argument for the soul. It's just, have you tried soul? What, soul music? Soul food? No, just, the soul that leaves your body when you die. All right. I forgot, yeah, you have a surgery, don't you? And, you rise up and you see the people, in the time on the watch and the sandwich they were talking about or whatever. And that was the soul. It's not anesthetic awareness or anything like that. But that, that was from the last video, and it ties into this one. It's almost like they're the same thing. Anyway. So, it's not even, when I think of it, it's not even 8 arguments. It's not even 9 arguments, is it? It's not even 9 arguments. It's 8 arguments. It's 8 arguments for God. 1 thought experiment for God of, come on! Come on! Right? And 1 argument of, well, the soul. And where did the soul come from? So you've got to make up one thing that we have literally no proof for to assert that another thing that we have literally no proof for, well, that exists because the other thing exists. Since I have not found any zombies, I can emphatically say that ghouls exist.
Then there's the argument from mathematics, which says there's an infinite reality higher than our physical universe. So basic math isn't all that special. For example, the number 5 corresponds to 5 apples, and 5 times 3 corresponds to 3 groups of 5 apples. But the more you get into advanced math, the more math starts to get disconnected from our world, but it still works. For example, there's real numbers, which are numbers that correspond to real things. But there's also imaginary numbers that are just as mathematically real, but they don't correspond to the real world, which is why they're not called real numbers. But they still exist mathematically, even though they don't exist in the real world. Let's look at the 5 most important numbers in mathematics. 1 is obviously important because it's the basis for all real numbers. 0 is very important because it's necessary for doing algebra. I is very important because it's the basis for all imaginary numbers. E is very important for doing exponential functions, and pi is necessary for doing math with circles. Now, all these numbers are seemingly unrelated to each other, but they fit together beautifully in this equation called Euler's identity. It was discovered by Euler, one of the greatest mathematicians in history, and he saw this as proof that math was designed by God. Also, Euler was a devout Calvinist. More evidence that math has a designer is the Mandelbrot set, which is generated by a very simple equation in the complex plane, but it produces infinite detail. You can keep zooming in on this shape and it will keep generating more and more complexity, even though nobody designed this. The Mandelbrot set is infinite, and it's not found anywhere in our universe, so that means whatever created it must also be infinite and not from our universe. So those are the common arguments for God, and by the way, this video wasn't intending to make any of these arguments. It would take a much longer video to do any of these arguments justice. It's just to give you guys an overview of these arguments so you can look more into them yourselves if you want. And now it's time for the best argument of all, which is, trust me, bro.
I did high school math, and that was it, okay? I don't know a lot about complex math. All I'm going to say is from what I've seen, no, of course not. So the Mandelbrot set goes on forever and ever, and that means it's God. Well, if it goes on forever and ever and it can't be broken, doesn't that mean it's God? Because that's what you said before. But, you know, and then, Euler's identity uses all the important numbers, all four most important numbers in one equation. It's like, well, it was bound to happen somewhere. There's an infinite number of numbers and almost an infinite number of equations. So, what? One of them that uses exclusively the four fundamental numbers. Oh, well, you see, that's proof of God. Do you know what this sounds like? It sounds like this comes from a society that used to imprison, kill, and like ostracize people that didn't believe the same thing as them. And nobody could offer up any argument to the otherwise. Because why would you want to? You would be denouncing God if you said that this proof of God doesn't prove God. You know, like back in the day when you Christians used to argue about, you know, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Like, really? When I hear shit like this, what I hear is, have you seen how beautiful this math is? So when I hear, this is beautiful math, therefore God, what I hear is, come on, my brother, do you not see this verse in the Quran? It has 120 verses, 120 rhetorical devices in this verse. Whatever. It's so beautiful that this person made it. It must be divine! Like, fuck off. Okay? How about this? How about I use this as an example? You see, this video is a perfect example of the Gish Gallop, right? Now, they want to put out as many things for you to try and debunk as possible, right? I know mostly these videos are for other Christians, but they know that people like me are going to watch it, and people like me who make videos on YouTube or whatever, or blogs or whatever, are going to try and make fun of it. So then they also want to be able to go, hi, you debunked all of these, but you did not debunk that one solitary argument. Therefore, God exists. Because, you know, the God of the gaps is real, yo. And it's strong. Because that's all they care about, right? They want to throw as much shit at you they want to throw as much shit at you as possible, just so you can miss some of it and go, ha! You didn't debunk that, therefore God is real. Because they're so desperate to do it, that all they have is underhanded tactics, bad arguments, and paths to lead you down. Because if they had one shred of fucking proof that it was real, they would hold that aloft and pass it around all the fucking churches and, like, make everyone come in a line and look at the fucking thing and go, look, it's fucking God, okay? But they don't have any of that. That's why they've got to talk about the Mandelbrot set. And, well, you know, God has all these divine abilities, and that means that he exists. Well, you know, he has to exist because we can think of an all-powerful being. This is the absolute bottom of the barrel that these assholes have been peddling for over 1,000+ years. Right? Because the people like me were not allowed to speak out. Because they, you know, like, oh, like Galileo went, we're not the center of the universe. And have you seen the rings around Jupiter? And they went, it's God's ears! Whatever. You know, and they put him in prison. And they put him through an inquisition. And Victor Calisthenes, Saint Calisthenes, that stood up for him. You know, it started the... Oh, what schools were they called? Bollocks. And all the pedophilia at the start. You know, Piarist schools, that's the one. But, you know, that's beside the point. It's not beside the point. The whole point is every time science has said, hey, by the way, this is how the world works, or we have figured out something about the world, something about the mind, religion says, nay, unless they think they can niggle it in some way into proof for God. Because that's all they care about. They want to prove themselves true. And then they get pissed off that a scientific-minded atheist goes, do you know what? Science says you're going to poke holes in everything, so we're going to poke holes in everything. If we can't poke holes in everything, well, then that's sufficient evidence to be true, because that's how science works. But you guys care more about, well, you know, I've got 25 different arguments. Well, I've got 8 different arguments. You know, like, whatever. I hope you all had fun. I didn't. This is excruciating, because I had to do this again. I know I've got to stay up all night to do this, so all you lovely people can watch it on time. See ya.